All right, next up we have the Surprise Tennis and Racket Complex Ball Kids. They're one of the most active public tennis facilities in the country. The complex hosts numerous national and international events, with many of the tournaments requiring ball kids to assist with the event. The STRC Ball Kids are active year-round. Over the years, the STRC Ball Kids have served as ball persons for the 2008, 9, and 10 CTCA Championships, 2007 through 2011 Pro Circuit Women's $25,000 event, the 2009 Federation Cup quarterfinal, the USA versus Argentina, and the 2009 and 2010 National Campus Championships. Very hardworking group, and they do a great job.
Right, and following behind them is the Glendale Assembly number 8 International Order of the Rainbow for Girls, and is a service organization for girls between 11 to 20. The lessons of love, religion, nature, immortality, fidelity, patriotism, and service are their focus. Some of their service projects include Lake Pleasant Cleanup, Dinner for Ronald McDonald House, Relay for Life, and the American Cancer Society.
Following the Rainbow Girls is Sun City Awnings. Sun City Awnings is excited to be here to honor our soldiers. I'd like to ask them to pull as close to the broadcast booth as you can and stop for about 15 minutes just so we can get a little shade and cool off here.
I agree with that. It is a great structure they have, though. And following them is Carescape.
Following Carescape, here's Gracie Linker in the original 1960 T-Bird.
Right here we have Signing Time Academy. Signing Time says thank you to the great military service of the United States.
Following them is Archie's Delis. Archie's was kind enough to donate their time and effort today for the pancake breakfast. And we truly do appreciate their support. How many people had pancakes this morning?
Woohoo!
Thank you, Archie's.
Right, and here we have Chick Sullivan in the classic 1954 pickup. Chick is the original owner and a retired U.S. Navy vet. What a beautiful blue.
That sounds great, too.
I bet he has a happy horn.
Next up, we have the City Manager's Award winner, the Silver, for Best Motorized Entry, Vehicle Reversing Systems. Vehicle Reversing Systems.
Okay, I call this special city council meeting to order. City clerk, let the records reflect that I believe everybody is here. And now I would like to invite everyone to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go to call to the public. This is a time in the meeting when anybody from the public is free to speak on any non-agendized item. Do we have anybody wishing to speak?
Yes, we do. The first person will be Bob Vakanovich.
Mayor Truitt and honorable council members, you're elected to take on the tough issues of the city. It's fine when you vote. Our problem is when concerns are not voted on or even discussed by this council. Such is why we don't have a Citizen Finance Oversight Committee, which we haven't had since April of 2007. We don't have a board of directors for the MPC. Both of these are concerns we have. As elected officials, we must depend on staff. We have to depend on staff. In my travels, I see professional managers taking our cities down the tubes. As in our case, $73 million. They've taken us down the tubes, while claiming that our city council was dysfunctional. They're saying our council was dysfunctional, and they're taking us down the tubes for $73 million. These same managers are receiving up to $500,000 in retirement pay. It is an eye-opener reading our budget books. I believe that professional auditing companies should be involved in our budget process. As we follow or do, are we following or do we have a checklist to see if we are doing what Red Oak said we should do? They gave you a good platform to follow. I don't know if we're following the platform of Red Oak or not. Why did you change the risk management fund from the finance department to human resources? Have you thought about putting it in the city manager's office and making sure that we have a qualified person watching it? You know, this is a big budget for that risk management, and I don't know if you have a qualified person, if you know if she's qualified or he's qualified, or was it a buddy job given to somebody? And the last thing I have in here, a lot of us veterans thought it was inappropriate for a seating council person and other candidates to campaign in our memorial parade. And I put this in a record. I gave it a share. Thank you.
The next person is Bill Lipscomb.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. As you know, my name is Bill Lipscomb. I'm an Air Force veteran of more than 33 years of service. My father served for over 30 years in both the Army and the Air Force and fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. My wife also served in the Air Force for more than 5 years. My oldest daughter served for 4. My son-in-law is still serving, finished up his 19th year in the Air Force. During my military career, and especially after my retirement, I became associated with many military veterans associations and groups, many of whom I consider close and dear friends today. What I became seriously aware of during our meetings and listening to personal stories was how traumatic war actually was, and how so many men and women sacrificed their lives to ensure the continuation of our liberties and those of people of other countries. I appreciated the fact that so many that survived combat but saw the deaths of so many of their comrades and friends firsthand so changed each of them. Not only did they carry the scars of war on their flesh, but perhaps even more painfully, the scars on their hearts and their souls. I knew the history of my father, especially during World War II, and his battalion in the 6th Armored Division on April 11th in 1945, where they liberated the infamous Buchenwald concentration camp. I found my mother, a survivor, wounded from a gunshot from a fleeing German soldier. I give this background to express how I feel as I witnessed the city's Memorial Day event on Saturday. The transgression from what should have been a solemn, dignified, and reflective occasion in which citizens honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country, and so many continue even so today. It was depressing to me to witness the degree in which the city of Surprise recognized this Memorial Day, with a circus parade and with politicians campaigning. The traditional observance of Memorial Day has diminished over the years. Many Americans nowadays have forgotten the meaning and traditions of Memorial Day. In many cemeteries, the graves of the fallen are increasingly ignored, neglected. Most people no longer remember the proper flag etiquette for the day, such as standing when the colors are marched past them. Some people think the day is for honoring any and all dead, and just not the fallen in the service to our country. The lack of understanding and appreciation of our citizens is sad. It's truly sad. We as a society need to return to the solemn and even sacred spirit of Memorial Day and its traditional day of observance. Many feel that when Congress made the day into a 3-day weekend, in which it became a national holiday in the Act of 1971, it made it even easier for people to be distracted from the spirit and meaning of the day. As the Veterans of Foreign Wars stated in the 2002 Memorial Day address, changing the date merely to create 3-day weekends has undermined the very meaning of the day. No doubt this has contributed greatly to the general public's nonchalant observance of Memorial Day. I spent a great deal of time the last couple of days here reflecting upon the meaning I came up with an idea, if you'll allow me, just for an additional minute, sir. I believe I came across, just through the process, maybe another way or another optional way of honoring our fallen during Memorial Day, say for next year. Prayer would be fine. I have no problem with that. But I also believe there should be something, a special observance on Memorial Day that is already pre-outlined in Memorial Day etiquette and these other avenues that you can take a look at. But I would suggest that perhaps you can begin with something in the baseball stadium, beginning with the ceremony begins in the morning at sunrise. You can look at the thing about the flag at half-staff. Noon, it goes to full staff. At that time, perhaps you can have veterans, not only veterans, but mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, or those that have fallen in the service to our country, and have the opportunity to speak to the public, to the listeners there in that forum, and share with the public what it is, the sacrifices that have been made. So I've outlined some of the ideas right here. I won't, speak about all these things, but I will, for the record, if I may, I'd like to give this to Mrs. Aguilar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And the next person is Ken Wright. Thank you. Oh, that's okay. Let's see. All right. Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Hereby close the call to the public, and we'll go to the first regular agendized item.
Item number 1, consideration and action of resolution 2011-70, a resolution memorializing prior pledges development fee revenues to debt service and prior pledge repayment related to construction of park and recreation necessary public services and declaring an emergency.
Mayor and Council, with your approval, I would, just in terms of a presentation, it would be for all four at once. And before I dive into that presentation, the council's willingness, I would ask that we go into an e-session for approximately 5 minutes so I can provide some legal advice before we act on these.
Do I have, counsel, do you want to go into executive session?
Yeah, I move we go into executive session.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned to go to executive session.
No discussion on that.
Need a second, please?
Second.
All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Thank you. We will move directly to item number 1. I believe it's been read. If there's any further presentation, this would be the appropriate time for that.
Thank you, Mayor. The items before you this evening are a response to recent legislation, SB 1525 specifically, that says that cities can only continue to collect the general government impact fee if it was pledged to repay debt service obligations prior to June 1st of 2011. And debt service includes bonds, notes, or other debt service obligations. And that's what we're doing this evening, is we're formalizing the obligation in terms of municipal finance. When you build projects, there's a need for pledging those funds and even general fund funds to pay for the cost of necessary infrastructure. It's important to point out that this action, there was a lot of discussion that came about with regards to a $40 million loan, and throughout this whole process, the issue is not a loan. The issue is actually preserving a revenue stream that's been made available to the city, for which the city has relied on, for which the city has financed necessary public infrastructure under, and wanting to maintain that revenue stream. In that regard, we've asked you to approve these. You will notice in the language that we are declaring them an emergency, and the reason why we're declaring them an emergency is because there are debt obligations that continually exist. It's important for us to maintain our credit worthiness and make sure that we make timely payments in that regard. Therefore, I'm asking that you would approve this as an emergency. And for your information, an emergency would require a supermajority of the council members voting in favor, which would be 5 members. With that, the language of the resolutions speak to themselves. I'm available for any questions, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, Council, we have one presentation that covers all 4 items. We will take each item individually in terms of questions. If there's questions on a specific item, we'll take it when that item comes before us. As for right now, item number 1, I think that the Council all agrees that we need to protect revenue streams, that is important to our residents, that growth pays for itself, and that's always been our policy. So if this is what it takes to try to protect it, I certainly would favor that action. Mr. Alton.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Bailey, when you say it's an emergency, I think we need to talk about that in a little bit more depth. What I heard you just say was that the emergency is because this is the last day to have something happen, a resolution from the City Council resolving this loan and protecting the revenue stream. Is that correct? And there's no other emergency?
Mayor and Council, yes, to the extent the legislation is not effective until January 1 of 2012. However, the legislation articulates June 1st, 2011 as a kind of a deadline date in this regard. Because of the time frame that's before us and because of the existing obligations in terms of kind of the cost of money, yes, there is an emergency to make sure that we can secure this ongoing revenue stream.
And that is just because we have 1 day left. This is the day. I hate the word emergency. It doesn't set well with
June 1st is the deadline. To the extent that we do not act on it this evening, then.
But that language doesn't mean anything else in this resolution that we are in a state of emergency.
In terms of a state of emergency, I guess if I understand your question, I guess to the purpose of that is it's articulating that because it is an emergency, that it's effective immediately. And in terms of it being referred, that it rather than have a 30-day referable period, it's effective immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just for, if I could get Scott to answer a quick question, or if our city manager wants to, how does this impact our current city budget? Can you clarify that? Because we were looking at a $40 million refinance. Does this have any impact on the current year's budget and FY12?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Councilmember Williams, to answer your question and to clarify what we communicated last week, the budget, the fiscal year 12 budget that you've adopted, the tentative budget last week, does have the authority to issue debt based on the $3+ million of capacity that's been created as you've had your budget deliberations. So I think that's on one aspect, that's the answer, is that there is the capacity there to issue the debt, but as we talked about, it takes explicit action even outside of this particular issue to issue debt. And we talked about even that before we saw this new legislation, is that council would want to have the ability to issue debt for other things, and then this issue came up sort of midstream. So that's on one level. And then on the second level, I think from the perspective of the budget and what it looks like this year and next year, the answer is that the operating budget has that capacity. Council will hold that in abeyance until they make a future decision about what to do with that, i.e. issue debt or redirect those to current expenses. But the thing I guess I want to take this opportunity to remind the council and the citizens of is that we still have other issues out there. You'll still have interfund loans. You'll still have an unfunded general fund reserve, and we'll need to address those, as we've talked about, perhaps starting in August and September as we go through that process. So the short answer to your question is it doesn't affect the budget, but there are budget implications moving forward into future years about having cash to do the kinds of things that the council's indicated they want to have the money to do.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion, is there anybody that's requested to speak?
Yes, the first person would be Ken Wright.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Councilman Williams seems to be pretty much on target here with his question about the current budget that's being looked at versus the longer-term impact. One of the things that I'd like to bring into this equation is one of the graphs that appeared at the last meeting. There was I believe, a red line and a blue line, and it was projected for the next several years. The top line was looking at revenue, expected revenue, and the bottom line was looking at expected expenditures, I believe. If my memory serves me correctly, starting from the left, that is the closest period of time, it was about $4.5 million differential, and then on out to the right, I think 5 years out, was maybe like 6 or 6.5 million. And as Mr. Williams indicated, and Scott also indicated, everything's okay as far as the budget you're looking at. But I'm very concerned that I heard some reference to starting doing something about this in August, September time period. But there is several things that slips past the date that they're supposed to be looked at. I think there was supposed to be something done on the general plan so that it could be on the ballot this fall, but apparently nothing was done on that, so this has slipped on past. I simply call these things slippage. Some of it probably occurs in the staff. Other things are a result of council's extensive consideration on some issue, or that the council is not working with the city manager to see that these things occur in a timely manner. Hopefully that part of it's going to be corrected. But there definitely needs to be consideration on some prioritization of the strategic plan that was developed. I mean, we can't just have a strategic plan and run away and hide in terms of funding, in terms of prioritization. So I know you're not going to do anything about that tonight, because you can't, and I understand that. But let's please try to stay on top of this. Let's stop the slippage. I believe a lot of that has been absolutely unnecessary. I know you guys are all busy, but sometimes if you have to have a meeting to adopt or to take action on 2 or 3 things that are building up behind the dam, just like water does, let's deal with them. Let's stay current. It doesn't make any difference. You know, if it requires an extra meeting, let's have one. And with that, thank you very much.
Mayor, the next person is Jackson Mull.
Good afternoon, mayors, members of council. My name is Jackson Mull. I'm the Deputy Director of Municipal Affairs for the Home Builders Association of Central Arizona. I'm also licensed to practice law in the state of Arizona. This afternoon, I sent you all a letter that outlines some of the legal concerns that the Home Builders Association has with the proposal as written in the resolution before you today. Given that you probably haven't had an opportunity to take a look at this letter, I wanted to address some of these issues with you today. Under the Arizona Constitution, cities only have those powers expressly delegated to it by the Arizona legislature. The power of a city to collect an impact fee is statutorily limited by Arizona Revised Statute 9-463.05, which has now been amended by Senate Bill 1525. I'm going to go on and from here on out just refer to it as 1525. The Arizona Supreme Court in the Scottsdale 1 case held that cities may not use fees for any purpose or in any manner that will not meet the statutory requirements. In deciding whether to adopt tonight's resolutions, the City of Surprise must be mindful of the constitutional and statutory limitations to collect impact fees. 1525 limits the city's ability to collect an impact fee to those specifically enumerated necessary public services and to repay any debt service obligation used to finance construction of a facility. Therefore, there are 2 legal issues that the council must address. First, whether an internal interfund loan is a debt service obligation as required by the statute, and second, whether this internal interfund loan is a debt service obligation that was used to finance construction of a facility. The Home Builders Association has concluded that it is neither. Moreover, at each and every meeting, city staff has taken the position that reimbursement of these interfund loans does not meet the definition of a debt service obligation. Today is the first time that this proposal has been presented as a legal option. Here, there are 2 indicia that no debt service obligation exists. First, the city may avoid its obligation to repay this interfund loan by simply writing it off. In fact, under generally accepted accounting principles, if this interfund loan is not repaid within a reasonable period of time, the city is required to treat it as a transfer between 2 funds and not as a debt. Second, the debt is not legally enforceable against the city or any of its assets. At the May 11th City Council study session, staff correctly took the position that these interfund loans were not a 2-party transaction and therefore no debt service obligation existed. Since there is no debt service obligation as required by 1525, impact fees, specifically a general government impact fee, cannot be collected for the purpose of reimbursing the general fund and the general CIP fund. In addition, the use of impact fees to pay a current debt service obligation is clearly distinguishable from reimbursing the general fund or the CIP fund. Specifically, once the financing of the City Hall has been paid, there is no debt service obligation that was used to finance construction of the facility, and simply reimbursing that money to the general fund under the guise of repaying a debt service obligation will simply just allow the city to use that money for any purpose it sees fit, regardless of whether or not it fits within the confines of 1525. Therefore, what I would like to remind the council is, as one court in California has noted, constitutional and statutory restrictions cannot be ignored based on budgetary convenience. In addition, the City Council should be aware that should it adopt these resolutions, the Home Builders Association will investigate any and all legal means to enforce the clear intent of this statute as outlined by the Arizona Legislature. So I see I'm out of time, and if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Also, if anyone would like a hard copy of my letter, I'm more than happy to provide that as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Bailey, you brought this forward as an option, and I'm assuming that it's your legal opinion that the city adopt these resolutions before us this evening?
Mayor, that is correct. Thank you.
Any other, is there anybody else from the public that wanted to speak on this?
No, that was the last one.
Any other comments or questions, council? No. Then, in regards to item number 1, may I have an action?
I move to approve resolution number 2011-70.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We've had the presentation on item number 2. For the record, would you please read it?
Consideration and action on Resolution 2011-71, a resolution memorializing prior pledges of development fee revenues to debt service and prior pledge repayment related to construction of the City Hall and other necessary public infrastructure and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public that was wishing to speak on this? Item number 2?
No, Mayor.
Okay, council, may I have an action?
I move 2011.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 3, when you're ready.
Consideration and action on Resolution 2011-72, and this one is memorializing prior pledge development fee revenues to debt service and prior pledge repayment related to construction of the fire necessary public infrastructure and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak on this item?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. May I have an action, council?
I move to approve resolution 2011-72.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please cast your vote. Or, excuse me. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. And finally, item number 4.
Consideration and action on Resolution 2011-73, a resolution memorializing prior pledges of development fee revenues to debt service obligations related to construction of wastewater facilities and infrastructure and declaring an emergency.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this particular item?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Council, in action, please.
Move to approve Resolution 2011-73.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Once again, unanimous. I believe that concludes the business for this evening. We have already taken the option of going into executive session. Therefore, this meeting is adjourned.
Into the ground and get into our water supply.